multiple true crime updates, massive fallout from a law enforcement cheating scandal in the South Carolina Low Country, and we may have finally answered the question, is Nancy Mace crazy or crazy like a fox? I'm Will Folks, owner and founding editor of FITSNews.com. Welcome to another edition of Your Week in Review. So our first segment this week, we are joined by our research director extraordinaire, Jen Wood, as we get ready for a big week this coming week. The Murdaugh appeal is finally upon us, and we have done a ton of coverage of this, including several episodes of this show. We're not going to belabor all of the arguments. Jen, you've done an amazing landing page on FITSNews.com. So if folks want to go and learn everything about the Murdaugh case, all the filings, all the latest articles assessing them, Jen Wood has got you covered on that FITSNews.com Murdaugh appeal landing page. But just a few things as we get ready for our coverage of this big event, the oral arguments for the appeal of Alec Murdaugh's 2 murder convictions. Jen, just a few things have happened in the last couple of days as that stage is set. Give us the breakdown on some of the recent developments.
So just a reminder, these are oral arguments on his appeal. There are 2 separate appeal issues that they're going to be hearing, the jury tampering and the admission of the financial crimes.
Whether they should have let all that in. Right.
So there are 2 separate things. And what they have done is they have added time to the time limits.
Usually it's half an hour?
Yes, usually it's a half an hour, and they added I believe 10 minutes to each side to argue the jury tampering and also for the financial crimes, which I can't read the tea leaves on that, but clearly they think that there's going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of questions from the justices to the attorneys making the arguments. So that is news that we had this week.
And that will be when we start reading tea leaves, is those questions will start saying, oh, what are they thinking?
Yes, those questions, a lot of times if you listen very carefully, you can get some indication of what they're thinking. So it will be a really interesting hearing legally. Also, each side, the state and the defense, has submitted notification to the Supreme Court about who will be at their tables. Dick Harpootlian, Jim Griffin, and Phil Barber will be arguing for Alec Murdaugh's team.
Okay.
And Creighton Waters will be arguing on behalf of the state. Attorney General Alan Wilson will be sitting with him at the table as well. And then they had a list of, I want to say, 12 to 15 additional individuals that will be there. I'm pretty sure it's the majority of the Attorney General's office, as well as SLED agent Peter Radofsky, former SLED agent David Owen, and one more former SLED agent.
The AG likes to roll with a posse, doesn't he?
They are rolling in deep on that.
You know, we were at the Senate oversight hearing not long ago, and the guy walked in with like an army. It felt like a brigade was entering the room.
Definite show of force on the AG side.
It's kind of like when the folks kids walk into a restaurant. You know, it's like the Red Sea parting. But anyway, so obviously these are the folks that are going to be the key players in the oral arguments, and obviously the justices peppering them with questions throughout, where we hope to get some sense of where they'll go with this. But again, if you have not been following these arguments, Jen Wood has you covered on FITSNews.com. Click on that Murdaugh appeal banner. You can check out all the articles detailing these arguments, look at all the cases, all the filings, just an incredible trove of resources if you want to get ready for that big hearing next Wednesday, February 11 at 9 a.m.
9:30. It starts at 9:30. Yeah. There's limited seating. They're not reserving seating for media. So we will be getting there as early as possible. Hopefully we can get in. And we will be providing a live feed on the page. So if you can't watch a hearing at work, we will be doing updates on the live feed. We'll also be streaming on our YouTube channel as well. It will be on SCTV.
Yeah, everybody's ripping the SCTV feed.
But we'll put it on ours. And then immediately after, we'll be coming back to the studio to do a live breakdown of what we saw in the courtroom. And we have a special guest joining us. Seton Tucker from Impact of Influence will join Will and I as we discuss it. So it'll be an interesting day. I think if you've been following this case, we've got a lot of good stuff coming your way this week.
No doubt. Seton Tucker has covered that case from the very beginning. Love her show. We've both been on her show
Yeah.
a few times, so I love having her come on ours. It's going to be fun having her insights, and she's just done a great job covering this. Also, Fitz Politic that evening will be focused on political news, but we will have on that show Justin Bamberg, state representative and a lawmaker who has been involved in the Murdaugh case, represented some of Alec Murdaugh's victims. So in addition to talking politics with Justin on that FITSPolitic Live next Wednesday night, we'll also ask him some Murdaugh related questions. So big Murdaugh week coming up ahead. But Jen, I want to move into some of the other cases that we've been covering, because obviously every time Murdaugh comes back around, we got to deal with it. It's sort of the story we've got to cover, because it was the story we broke, we advanced, we really drove the narrative, particularly after the verdicts. But we've got tons of other stories we've been covering. And this week, you filed a report on an unsolved mystery that we've been tracking for several years now. It occurred in August of 2018 in the South Carolina Low Country. Tell us the updates you've got on the death on the tracks investigation, Jen.
So this story it's one of the most frustrating stories I've ever covered. Daniel Reed Smith, also known as DJ to his family, was found on the train tracks in Dorchester County in August 2018. There was an investigation in the aftermath. Dorchester County was the lead agency in that investigation. And then because DJ's stepfather worked for Dorchester County and worked for the first or for the judicial
First
circuit,
Circuit, yeah.
First Circuit, as an investigator, they conflicted that out to SLED, I believe in November of 2018. So Dorchester did the initial investigation and then asked SLED to take over investigative duties. So
and who was the lead agent on this case?
Lead agent was David Owen, who we will see in the hearing on Wednesday for Murdaugh. This case, since Eric Melendez, DJ's stepfather, is a seasoned investigator, he knew from the onset that something was just not right. And he's been doing his own legwork for the past 7.5 years. They ended up ruling it an accident, saying he was hit by the train.
Yeah, give us some context here. This is a DJ's body found on the tracks or near the tracks. Injuries not consistent with a train strike in any way, shape, or form, but that's what they went with. That's sort of what they ultimately advanced as the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
But we quickly found out through your reporting, you and Andy Fancher went down there in particular, quickly found out he was killed somewhere else and his body was put there at this remote location.
Very clear. We had an independent medical expert review the autopsy report, the scene photos, and they said that there is absolutely no way the damage to his body was extensive, but it being hit by a train, it wasn't that extensive. They make no sense. There's tire tracks on his clothes. There's just a lot of things that are inconsistent. And he was at a party with friends. He left that party late in the night, was walking home allegedly. There's so many conflicting stories from the people that were with him last. There were interviews with people who knew him in the aftermath who said that this was not an accident. This was a murder. They named names. And the Carolina Courier, I want to say 2 to 3 weeks ago, put out a report about a jailhouse interview that was done in 2022 with a man named Ever Eady, who gave some very detailed information about what happened that night. Ever Eady has since died of a alleged drug overdose. There's some that don't believe that. And that report, he published it. It was redacted, but when I looked at the unredacted version of the report, one name stuck out to me, and that's Michael Bunch Sr. He said, this individual was involved. So I went back and looked at the initial
in the statement from Eady,
from Everett Eady. So I went back and looked at the initial investigative report, which is hundreds of pages long. we did get a full FOIA response from SLED, from the 14th Circuit, who took over the prosecutorial decisions, as well as from Dorchester. So I looked through all of that, and the detective initially handling the case with Dorchester County before SLED took over, when Mikey Bunch Sr.'s name came up, indicated that he was actually in Dorchester County Jail.
So he couldn't have done it.
Couldn't have done it. So
In
they're
jail.
not even going to follow up with this individual. And when SLED took it over, they relied on that initial report, except one thing. It wasn't Mikey Bunch Sr. that was in jail. It was Mikey Bunch Jr. This
Wow.
man was never interviewed by investigators. Whether or not he's involved, I don't know. Whether or not he is a
Right.
suspect, I do not know. But the implication that he was in jail, I think, was very inaccurate. I think it could have been a hindrance to the actual investigation and to getting answers. And the more I go through this 350-page case file, listen to all of these interviews done by investigators, listen to interviews done by the family and those close to the family, I'm finding a lot of information, conflicting information, and I'm going to keep going through that.
So it's a jailhouse confession
Mm-hmm.
that was ultimately disregarded, discarded, because they said, well, it can't be right because this guy was in jail. And then we come to find out
He was not.
through our research, he was not in jail. It was his son who was
Son.
incarcerated.
Yes.
Not the father.
Yes.
Oh, wow. So nobody caught this
Nobody
at any
caught
phase of the
this.
investigation. And it's not like just some, oh, well, this is a technical error or this is a fringe of the case. Doesn't really matter. This is someone that the jailhouse informant indicated was, according to them anyway, directly involved. And certainly we're not alleging that. We're not throwing that allegation out there other than to say our allegation is the cops missed it.
Correct.
Completely.
And it's like everything in this file. There were assumptions made by investigators that I don't know why. I don't know if it's just, I don't know why.
And here's the kicker, folks. We reached out to the State Law Enforcement Division this week for comment on Jen's article revealing this troubling error. Their response, the case is closed. Well, it's not closed for the family of DJ Smith. It's not closed for us, Jen, and credit to you for continuing to pursue this. This is a story that, again, we did an entire podcast episode on this, Fitz Files, Death on the Tracks, at the very beginning before we had a lot of this information. But it's one of those stories that, people just, oh, they don't care. Oh, it's just an error or whatever. And credit to you for digging on this case that everyone else was just ready to be done with. And you kept this going through your work. I can't thank you enough. And I hope that this family one day gets the truth about what happened.
Me
to
too.
their
We're
son.
getting closer every day, and we're not going to stop.
Good. And not only that, we will continue to hold those accountable investigators, prosecutors. We will continue to hold the system accountable if it continues to fail in this case. Jim, we've got other news, though, this week, though. Another big case we've been following over in Horry County.
Mm-hmm.
One of the highest profile stand your ground cases South Carolina has ever seen. A lot of media leaks, but hey, they did the job. This thing is blown up.
Yeah.
Wall Street Journal podcast, all sorts of other podcasts focusing on the death, the murder, some say, in September 2023 of North Carolina insurance adjuster Scott Spivey. Now, again, according to Spivey's family, who's filed a wrongful death suit against the two men who have acknowledged shooting him, according to the family, this was a premeditated murder, as I just mentioned. According to those two shooters and their attorneys, it was self-defense. Stand your ground, because according to them, Scott Spivey, in the moments leading up to that shooting, was waving a gun, was driving erratically, chasing them. Then they were chasing him. Then all of a sudden they pull off onto this side road 2 miles south of the North Carolina border. And according to the lawyers for the shooters anyway, he gets out with the gun, points it at them, and that's when all hell breaks loose. Jen, there are so many conflicting views on this case. It has become, again, one of those team sport things like the Murdaugh saga. But You've been researching this from the very beginning, looking at the raw evidence, looking at the files. Tell us what you're seeing in this case, and tell us, more importantly, what's happening in the courts right now related to this case.
So I'm trying to keep a very open mind about this because I do know that the investigation from the onset was flawed. Horry County Police, that there have been allegations of misconduct. There have been terminations, resignations in the aftermath due to this investigation. SLED is doing an ongoing investigation into those officers that handled this investigation.
In fact, the state grand jury's just been impaneled in
Correct.
connection with that investigation.
Yep. So, I'm trying to keep a very open mind because I don't know what is in discovery. I don't know what's going to come out in this hearing. But the attorneys leading up to this stand your ground hearing, which
When
is
is that? When and where is
beginning
that hearing?
February 17th in Horry County, this hearing is basically in front of a judge. There's no jury. And what this judge is going to do is listen to the evidence and determine if Weldon Boyd and Kenneth Bradley Williams should be granted immunity if this was a self-defense act. So going into this hearing, what we're seeing is the plaintiff side, so Spivey's family, and the defense side trying to determine what evidence is going to make it in front of this judge. They have deposed witnesses who saw the shooting, heard the shooting, saw the moments leading up to the shooting. They have submitted a deposition by an audio expert who listened to the gunshots in the background, and this is the plaintiff side, so Scott Spivey's family, and gave his opinion on what he heard in terms of gunshots.
And he claims Scott Spivey never shot at the two individuals at Williams.
The
And
shots all came from one side.
from Boyd and Williams.
Mhm.
Okay.
And in addition, they've also filed a motion to compel SLED to turn over data from iPhones and an iPad.
Did you say
That
data? Is that like
data,
Michigan?
yeah, well,
You
yeah,
know, in
I
South
know.
Carolina, I'll say data.
Data from iPhones and iPads that were taken in the aftermath in this investigation by SLED. Now, Spivey's attorneys or Weldon Boyd and Kenneth Bradley Williams' attorneys have pushed back on that motion to compel SLED to provide everything, saying that that was a limited. They provided only limited permissions.
And they're worried about leaks because there have been a
Right,
ton of leaks in
a
this
ton of
case.
leaks in this case.
In fact, there's a lawsuit filed by one of the shooters, Weldon Boyd,
Mhm.
against one of the attorneys for Spivey's family, Mark Tinsley.
Yeah,
An entirely separate lawsuit has been filed against Tinsley, tying back to some of these alleged leaks.
yeah. I mean, lawsuits on top of lawsuits.
Yeah.
Yes. So they've pushed back saying that they don't want the data to get out there. They don't what Boyd and Williams signed was limited. Did not give them access to everything on their devices.
But here's a question I would have, and wouldn't Mark Tinsley have a point here that if there is something in that that's relevant to what this judge is trying to decide, I mean, maybe you didn't give
Right. So
permission, but
there were a ton of Facebook messages between Weldon Boyd and Kenneth Bradley Williams that Weldon Boyd told Williams to delete. Um, and I think there's a motion
Yeah.
about that as well. I do.
guilty conscience.
Yeah, I think that may be a huge part of why they're seeking this data, and it could be important to this case.
Do we have any indication, Jen, that this grand jury that's been impaneled by Seventh Circuit solicitor Barry Barnett, who inherited this case from Attorney General Alan Wilson? Now, the Attorney General, his office concluded this was a stand your ground shooting, that they could not, based on the evidence, criminally charge either Boyd or Williams with the murder of Scott Spivey. According to them, it was, in their estimation, self-defense. Now, Wilson is sending this entire case, including the allegations of law enforcement misconduct, to Barry Barnett up in South Carolina's Seventh Circuit, which, for those of you who don't know, that's up in Spartanburg and Cherokee counties. But This is all now before a grand jury. Do we have any sense, Jen, that they are looking at not only the law enforcement misconduct, but do we think that this grand jury could hear evidence against the two shooters?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely a possibility. I also think it could be a smart move. Put the evidence in front of a grand jury, and let them review it and make the determination.
Yeah. So let them decide as opposed to prosecutors.
Right,
Okay.
right. So yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely, is a possibility, and I'm anxious to see where that goes as well.
But having seen some of this, and again, all this stuff gets leaked all over the place, but having seen some of this, is there not, without going into too much detail, is there not evidence out there that would support the determination that this was self-defense?
I have seen some evidence that supports that determination, but I haven't seen all of the evidence.
And again, to play devil's advocate again, if there is some evidence out there that supports self-defense, if it's a criminal case, you got to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that
Right,
this was a premeditated
right,
murder.
exactly.
And if there's evidence suggesting that, well, okay, we got the audio expert saying that Scott Spivey did not fire a round. Again, not commenting on that. That's the plaintiff's expert. But there is indications that he came out of a vehicle with a gun. There
hmm
is indication that
I mean, according to witnesses, he was waving a gun as he was driving down the road leading up to the shooting. So there was a gun in the car. He was acting very erratic. I think he was, driving. He was driving people off the road. So there is evidence of that. There is witness statements to that effect.
it's just what happened on that
What
road.
happened on Camp Swamp Road is what matters.
Yeah. And we don't
And
know.
we don't know. And if the judge is going to hear all of this evidence, and if he grants them immunity, it will not go to a jury trial for wrongful death.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. Game over.
Yeah. They cannot be civilly prosecuted in connection with that.
Correct.
Absolutely. So we're going to find out, folks, whether or not this was a pursuit resulting in a premeditated killing or whether it was self-defense based on, again, someone pulling off on the side of the road quickly, maybe coming out with a gun. We don't know. We're going to find out what the judge will do in this case. Eugene C. Griffith is the presiding judge in this case. I think he's been doing a great job.
Yeah, very even. He's just a very even-keeled judge. Presides over the courtroom very well. And the attorneys seem to respect him a great deal. So it's been nice to watch him.
Yeah, he's been very cautious and very deliberate in his rulings. I think he understands it's a super high profile case with a lot of emotions on all sides. So FITSNews will be covering that trial later this month. So keep it tuned to FITSNews.com. Our research director, Jen Wood, on all of these cases. Just unbelievable work. Jen, I cannot thank you enough. You've been not only digging deep into legal case files, evidence, cold case files, but you've been analyzing them and you've been publishing just incredible stories on them. So, again, amazing work on all these cases, Jen.
Thank you.
We've had all manner of law enforcement misconduct reports here at FITSNews, led by our top investigative reporter, Andy Fancher. But I don't think we've had one quite like the scandal that has enveloped the Mount Pleasant Police Department. Now, Mount Pleasant, of course, one of the largest municipalities in the Palmetto State, located just east of Charleston, South Carolina. It's a very wealthy municipality, huge police force down there, but they have been embroiled in a massive scandal over cheating on certification exams administered by the South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy. Andy, you've been at this on this story from the very beginning. Walk us through what happened and the fallout from it.
Sure. For starters, I do find it fascinating that this scandal has gained as much traction as it has. I mean, we've covered far more salacious police scandals here at FITSNews, but alas, we are here at Mount Pleasant in the Low Country with approximately 10 officers that have been accused of cheating on specifically, allegedly, a data master recertification test.
It's the breathalyzer.
The breathalyzer.
Yeah.
So, in order for your findings in a DUI investigation to be admissible in court, you need to be certified to administer the data master test. And according to at least some separation papers that we have received from the South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy, it appears as though some officers might have cheated on either the certification or recertification of that specific test.
Now, is this a difficult test? Is this an elaborate process? I mean, what exactly is this test that they're alleged to have cheated on?
I have been told by individuals familiar with this test that a monkey with a crayon could pass it. But
So no, not a very weighty intellectual exercise.
I suppose it depends on who you ask.
Oh.
But for at least 9 officers that we have confirmed their identities of, it rose to a level of cheating. And in fact, I've brought all 9 officers with me because, again, the traction on this story is just absolutely insane. And part of that traction includes people pushing back on us publishing their names, which we are the only outlet to do. So I am all of the opinion and belief that the beatings will continue until morale improves. So for that, why not name drop, name and face the 9 officers whose identities we have been able to confirm? We'll start with St. Clair Lee Clinksales. She clocked in over 6 years at Mount Pleasant. She came with no prior experience. Alec Richard Cummings served more than 3 years with the department. We've got Zachary Perry Bonadies. We've got Jamie Ellen Matthews. We've got Caroline McKay Drowlett. Don't quote me on these names. We've got Kendall Elizabeth Jost, just lost her law enforcement certification. We've got this gentleman whose name I'm not even going to try and pronounce, but his history is on FITSNews. It clocked not even or approximately 3 months with the department. That's how long he was in law enforcement. And you can see we're just continuing along. Harrison Taylor Hodgert previously served with the Charleston Police Department. He came with experience. And finally, we've got Adam Bradley Scher, previously served with Myrtle Beach Police Department. And in fact, his story is a bit more interesting than the 8 that I just noted. He left prior to these guys all befalling an internal affairs investigation. He joined the Charleston County Sheriff's Office, and he was subsequently resigned from that sheriff's office a day before everybody else that I just listed was popped. And that's where we're at. There is, of course, one final identity that we have not yet confirmed, but I am efforting that, and perhaps there is a chance of a possibility that by the time this video is up, we will already have that identity confirmed.
Let me walk our folks through this because we made the editorial decision here. Hey, we got the names, we've got the documentation, we're going to run them. But tell folks why it's important, Andy, from your perspective, that we do this. And as you mentioned earlier, it's not the most salacious law enforcement scandal we've ever covered. A lot of these folks are going to be able to get a second chance, more likely than not. But walk us through why it's important.
Well, before we walk through why it's important, I do want to address this part that you just mentioned about the chance of a possibility that they could return to law enforcement. So just yesterday, I hopped on, I wouldn't call it a press conference, more of a town hall with the South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy director, Jackie Swindler. And what Jackie did for approximately an hour on Thursday was kind of just answer in a very conversational manner the number of questions that the press has acquired over the process of covering this story for approximately 2 weeks. He spoke specifically on just the process of a misconduct termination and how one can appeal that. Now, he also noted that of the officers who are accused of misconduct in this state, the hardest to appeal are the terminations that involve dishonesty. Cheating is dishonest. So whatever comes of these guys, because I don't know if they have filed for an appeal or not.
Right.
It's going to be a long road ahead to return to law enforcement. My understanding.
Yeah. Well, integrity matters, folks, and whether it's a badge gone bad, breaking the law, whether it's a badge gone bad, using excessive force or improperly administering their authority, or whether it's something like this, a scandal involving dishonesty. Andy, call them out. You always have.
And speaking to why it's important, because I've seen on social media in our inboxes, um, people demanding an explanation as to why we would publish their names and faces. Innocent until proven guilty, I thought.
Well, they
Well,
are.
they make the editorial decision, these departments, every day to post innocent until proven guilty people on Facebook,
They do.
subsequently ruining their lives before a trial or adjudication of charges. So I feel absolutely nothing.
It's good for the goose, good for the gander, right?
Well, it's good for a matter of public disclosure, public transparency, and just holding our institutions accountable. I mean, Swindler yesterday noted that in 2025 alone, there were approximately 250 officers that the CJA was made aware of where misconduct was filed against them. Now, that, of course, does not include the officers who should probably be arrested, but instead are allowed to resign and go to other agencies. We've reported on them time and time again. I need not mention the officer in Welford who somehow returned to law enforcement after recording or admitting on a recorded line that she sold more drugs than a convicted felon. Sydney Tyson. You can go get stopped by her right now in Spartanburg County, but as we're aware, Spartanburg County has quite a bit of issues. Just look at the sheriff. Ex-sheriff, for instance.
Well, speaking of Spartanburg County, and I wanted to ask you this because I overheard walking through the office this week, you were digging through the Epstein files, and I heard you mention something about Spartanburg County has made an appearance in the Epstein files. Is this for real?
I don't want to spoil it just yet, and I don't want to promise anything.
Okay.
But at this time, I am efforting what I feel would be safe to call an Epstein exclusive that does,
all right,
shockingly enough,
wow,
relate to the upstate region of South Carolina.
It's crazy how many connections there are to these files. And I mean, it's just, there's so much information in them, first of all, but so many these threads that are just being pulled from these documents.
Well, it's crazy too that our local media isn't doing a thing with it.
Yeah.
I mean, the files are very easily searchable.
Yeah.
We have done it. Dylan has done yeoman's work on the Epstein vortex and operation.
Indeed,
and I'll be trying my hand at it hopefully this coming week.
Well, and you've got a little bit of a story though from a trip you had down in Florida. It was you were in Palm Beach, and you had a little interaction with a dude. You were out taking pictures or something, using some. Tell the story.
Without context, this sounds awful, but there is a chance of a possibility, and I would not testify to this because I am not confident in it, but there's the chance of a possibility that while I was in Florida in 2018, while filming a totally unrelated documentary on planet Mars of all things, I waved to a gentleman that appeared as though, with hindsight being 2020, was Epstein.
Wow.
But again, I'm not saying that with
in
confidence.
Palm Beach.
Well, it was on the island, not West Palm Beach. I mean, it was Palm Beach, and I had specifically photographed a police car. You
were using one of those big, massive
road.
Printout Polaroid type cameras.
I was infatuated with analog photography at the time, and in fact, we'll throw up the photo that I snapped before waving to a gentleman with a long face and white hair. But I mean, will I ever know for sure? No. Is it bragging right to say that I waved to Jeffrey? I mean, maybe if you're the president, but that's it.
He's off in the distance. He's leaning over some balcony.
There was a gentleman who was leaning over a balcony watching me as I photographed the squad car. Again, though, will I ever know? And obviously it's exciting to think, oh my gosh, should I actually wave to this monster? But again,
the guy that's going to bring down a republic.
Who's
literally Epstein, the guy that's going to bring down a republic? You waved to that dude.
Well, I mean, here we are, 3.5 million files later, and all that we've had is lip service and 0 arrests. So that might be wishful thinking, unfortunately. I'd love to see the revolution myself.
Well, that makes 2 of us, brother. Andy, amazing work this week, man. Keep on them. No matter what kind of grief you get for it, keep on them. So as we move closer to a pivotal election cycle here in South Carolina, we call it Crossroads 2026, a moment where the state of South Carolina, particularly the Republican primary voters who tend to dominate the election process here in South Carolina, they're going to make some big decisions over the course of the next few weeks and months. And one of those big decisions, Dylan Nolan, joining us now, is who will be the next top prosecutor for the state of South Carolina. You and I have talked about this a lot, Dylan. There's a lot of people running for governor, and most of the media focus is on them. But is that the office they should be focused on?
If you go by which office wields more pure power, obviously the Attorney General in the state of South Carolina wields a lot more pure power. The governor's office is actually very weak.
It's like the Queen. It's like
Right, ceremonial role.
Yeah.
Cut some ribbons, stand on some golden shovels, give a speech.
So why does the current Attorney General, who has been on this show a couple times, why does he want to be governor?
I mean, you got to think politics is like a ladder. You hear a lot. I mean, a lot of our former presidents are former governors.
Yeah.
Not so many former attorneys general.
Okay. Well, fair enough.
And I don't know what exactly Alan would like for his future, but you got to think you're taking a step up in the rung, whether that's you want to be a U.S. senator or go for the highest office in the land.
Well, one of the guys running to replace him, another guy who's been in our studio on several occasions, David Pascoe, the First Circuit solicitor here in South Carolina, oversees a 3-county region just south of Columbia, Columbia area, made a pretty explosive announcement up in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Dylan Nolan. Now, this is a guy who is no stranger to throwing bombs, David Pascoe, but he threw a king-size turd in the punch bowl, as some would say, during this speech in Myrtle Beach. And he was specifically referring to an incident that we covered extensively when it happened last year, an incident on the floor of the South Carolina Senate where a state senator, Tom Fernandez, laid out in pretty clear terms how power really gets wielded in Columbia, South Carolina. In fact, let's just go ahead and listen to this as the Senate was discussing the issue of tort reform and whether or not to make our laws less friendly to the trial lawyer lobby. Here's what Senator Fernandez said happened.
Here's the quiet part out loud. Did you know that the trial lawyer lobby has offered me campaign fundraisers in the amount of $50,000 to $100,000 per campaign if I voted against this? Did you know that?
I was not aware of that, sir.
And did you know that
Senate will suspend? President, I move that we go in. I would just caution this. Let's caution the body. Stand at ease momentarily.
And Will, you had some sort of crystal ball going on in your office the day that this happened. What did you write?
Yeah, we called immediately for an investigation. We said that it needed to be an independent investigation, that it shouldn't be some legislative, inside baseball inquiry, that it should be, people should be polygraphed, people should turn over their messages, people should turn over their phone logs, that we should get to the bottom of this, because basically this guy was alleging that votes were purchased.
Indeed.
And obviously David Pascoe this week at this speech that we're talking about, well, let's just cut to what he had to say, because this is, again, one of the more bombshell moments we've seen in this race for Attorney General. Here's David Pascoe announcing what he would do regarding this scandal.
We had a state senator stand up last year, it is on video, I will post it, and literally say that he was offered between $50,000 and $100,000 from the trial lawyers for his campaign account if he would vote against tort reform. Is there anybody here that does not think that's a crime?
Yes, it is. Which way did he go?
Against tort reform. But here's what gets even worse, my friend. Here's what gets worse. After he said that, the president of the Senate goes apoplectic. It took him a minute to finally get a sentence out. And the sentence he finally got out was, the Senate will be adjourned. They go back to their offices for 2 hours, come back and act like nothing happened. When I'm your Attorney General, there is no statute of limitations on misconduct in office. When I'm your Attorney General, on day one, SLED will go interview every senator and find out what he was talking about.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Do you see why they tried to keep me off the ballot?
Yes. Yeah.
Now, Dylan, I love the last part of this quote where he talks about, "Do you see now why they're trying to throw me off the ballot?" I mean, he's not wrong.
Yeah, we spent the last 2 weeks talking about a bill which is now dead, which, if it had proceeded, had the possibility of taking Pascoe and a number of other candidates off the ballot by instituting requirements to run as a Republican in the primary that he could not satisfy, that Colonel Alex Pelbath could not satisfy. Now, you listen to the authors of the bill and they go, that was not our intention, but man, it's sure convenient.
It was very convenient, and I think that he made it very clear in this speech that, look, you elect me, I'm going to do this day one. He said day one, and again, will he live up to that? Obviously, we'll have to see if he gets elected first of all. But it's a very bold promise, and it's on something that I think folks in Columbia clearly. I mean, you watched that clip just a moment ago. Those senators, they were petrified. I mean, this guy said the quiet part out loud, literally had them scurrying back into their offices for cover. And now you got somebody threatening to expose that. And this isn't just, some low podunk special interest that's pushing one bill. This is the most powerful special interest in the history of the state. They wield just incredible power over the legislature.
Yeah, and he opened his campaign with a shot across the bow. I mean, he was literally doing a press conference between the two chambers, and this is before the General Assembly returned to Columbia, where he was showing the folks that he had previously successfully prosecuted people of similar levels of power in the state of South Carolina. So it's not like he's some nobody saying, I'm going to come and clean up Columbia with no record of doing so, who you would just believe would probably end up becoming a member of the swamp as soon as they were actually in office. No, I mean, this is a guy who's done it before, and if elected, he says he'll do it again.
David Pascoe, of course, former Democrat, just last year switched his party affiliation from Democrat to Republican. A lot of folks have questioned that. But again, we've seen a lot of party switching in this state over the years, Dylan Nolan, and we've also seen a lot of Republicans get elected that are frankly not that much different from the Democrats that they replace. But Pascoe running against two other individuals, one of them State Senator Stephen Goldfinch, the other 8th Circuit Solicitor David Stumbo. That race wide open. In fact, we have seen 2 polls within the last week which show more than 2/3 of Republican primary voters in South Carolina undecided as to who they would choose to be their next attorney general, which, as Dylan mentioned, that is where the power is. But we're going to keep tracking this race as it moves forward. And clearly, this bombshell revelation from David Pascoe, probably the biggest news we've covered in this AG race, Dylan.
It's certainly a bombshell, and I think that Pascoe has been doing a really good job of cutting a lane for himself out in this race. I think that he could make it to a runoff election. However, if he does make it to a runoff election, he's going to face a tough road because that's when the folks who will be split among the traditional GOP rivals, as I will label them, folks who have been in the GOP their whole political careers, they'll have a consolidation of power behind them, and he's going to face the might of the SC GOP versus himself if he does end up making it to a runoff election.
Yeah, and obviously there are a lot of powerful interests that are already arrayed against him. Although I would point out, David Pascoe's taking a lot of money from trial lawyers too. So this is a guy who is talking about some of this trial lawyer money and the potential corruption. I mean, his campaign account has been filled with some of those same names. So anyway, we'll keep a close eye on whether or not he follows up. But speaking of bombshells, we can't talk about political bombshells in South Carolina, Dylan, without talking about Nancy Mace. She seems to be a bombshell a day. Basically, her campaign has been nothing but, I don't want to use the word histrionics necessarily. That would probably get me in trouble. I just used it. There we go. I'm in trouble. But it's been kind of unhinged. I mean, let's be honest. It's been kind of all over the map. But within the last week, 2 new polls that we've seen showing Nancy Mace in the lead, whereas just this past month, we'd seen a survey that had shown her drop all the way down into 4th place. Where do we really think Nancy Mace is in the governor's race? Is she at the top of this pack, or is her kind of hyperbolic personality dragging her down? What do you think, Dylan?
So first of all, there's a big national piece which came out, I believe, on Monday this week, which was talking about Nancy Mace's, kind of the internals of her operation, both in Congress and on her campaign. And one of the lines that was in there that I like is that she tries to bill herself, or at least she was with her staff, a strategy called National Nancy, where she's constantly hitting these national news networks, aiming at 1 to 3 cable news appearances a day and kind of holding her staff accountable to facilitate that. And I think that's reflective in the polls that we've seen this week, because the big poll that was released was one of registered voters, which is important because a lot of the other ones we're looking at where she's lower in the standings are of people who have a history of voting in Republican primaries. So if you take registered voters, that's a much wider subset of people. It's still, people who have gone and gone through the work of registering to vote. So you're cutting out people who are very unlikely to vote, but it's the broadest subset of people that I would say is representative of the possible electorate. And she is doing a lot better with that group than she does once you cut it down to, like you said, the small group of people who participate in Republican politics who will eventually end up deciding the election. And I penned a report earlier this week talking about the betting odds in this race. And the last election cycle showed us for sure that people putting their money down is one of the best ways to get an accurate count. I mean, the betting markets were for months blowing out the polls in their accuracy because
Hands
people
down.
have the best incentive to be correct, which is winning or losing money. And as it stands right now, it is a neck and neck race between Alan Wilson and Pam Ebbett, with Mace having started strong, but having slid. And so I'm going to be keeping my eye on these betting markets as the market, incorporates this information that's been released this week, incorporates these two polls, which are really good for Nancy. And I think that will be the real test of whether people believe that these polls are reflective of reality.
Well, we keep hearing, though, that she does better in the polls that have this sort of broader reach, that if you're only talking to sort of the high info consumption insider crowd, her negatives are through the roof. She's not faring well in those polls. But you could add 10% to her numbers just by kind of broadening out to that more likely primary audience. And I wanted to read one thing. We've had a consultant who penned us, and we're not allowed to say their name, but they penned, I think, a pretty interesting analysis. We're in a very anti-establishment environment. People want a fighter, even if they are crazy. Everyone else is running the worst campaigns I've seen. South Carolina governor. Nancy is the only one who understands the electorate right now. And that's from somebody, we're not going to drop the name, but that's somebody who knows, somebody who's in a position to know these voters, these Republican primary voters. And we asked this question, Dylan, on the show just last week. Is she crazy, or is she crazy like a fox?
Yeah, I mean, this week's polls would indicate that the fox like crazy might be accurate. And I think it's important to note that Donald Trump was in a very similar situation both of the times that he won, where actually, really the first time they won, 2016, where you look at these party insiders and every single one of them was polling for Rubio.
Right.
But you looked at the broader electorate and they were polling for Trump. And the magic that drove him to win the primary and eventually win the general election is that he took these people who traditionally would not vote in a primary and turned them out and got them to vote and kind of changed the composition of the electorate such that he was able to achieve victory, historic victory even.
Yeah.
Mace, if she could pursue a similar strategy successfully, could do the same thing. However, that's going to take money. Obviously, you need to reach people. There's just going to be a battle of blowing cash out on television and other advertisement. And
It's going to take discipline, too.
it's going to take discipline to not go off the rails, and it's going to take money to get the message in front of people. But that is certainly a path that she could try to cut.
I want to bring one other point up regarding Nancy Mace. And this week, you mentioned that story that came out, the New York piece that really slammed her. It was a brutal piece. But the timing of it being released, Dylan, was curious to say the least. Nancy Mace was one of the only Republicans in Washington, D.C. for a long time pushing for the full release of the Epstein files. She went up against President Trump on that issue. She was one of only a handful of Republicans to do that. This comes out right at the moment that detonation of those Epstein files, we were talking with Andy earlier. I mean, it's everywhere. You can't go anywhere without reading.
Really? Because you could go to the front page of the New York Times and not read about it. You could go to the front page of the Wall Street Journal and not read about
Well,
it.
clearly I'm consuming my news from other places because...
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could go to the front page of the failing Washington Post and not read about it.
Wow. They're just abdicating.
Right.
Yeah. But do you feel Mace has been targeted in a way by the... Do you think this was sort of like, hey, you messed with us, this is what you get?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that you look at what Trump has done. He's waging war on Thomas Massie, a guy who votes with him 90% of the time, a guy who supports all the policies that Trump ran on, not necessarily what he's doing now that he actually has the wheel, but he's committed to destroying this guy. I mean, the biggest donors in the Republican Party have dumped $1 billion on Thomas Massie's House race.
Yeah.
And I think that there's that wing, which obviously Nancy Mace has transgressed. Massey has made a career out of pissing off these people. Nancy has basically said, "Look, I had to take this one vote because I staked this position out." If you look at her statements on it, she's not driving nearly as hard on this as Massey. I mean, you see Massey talking about this incessantly on his social media. Of course, Mace is taking a victory lap, but she's doing it in a muted way as to uh, not piss this crowd off more than she already has. But you've got that crowd, which, of course, you vote like this against them, they're going to make you pay for it. You've then got the Kevin McCarthy crowd. Remember, she took this vote to remove Kevin McCarthy as House Speaker, and that guy has just been on a revenge tour since then. Anybody who's taken that vote against him, he's like committed his life to destroying their future, and he is certainly not forgotten. He's going to attempt to take her out in any way that he can. So she has some people lurking in the tall grass trying to take her out.
No doubt. And FITSNews has been very critical of Nancy Mace in recent months. Obviously, she's a former partner in this website. She was a co-owner of FITSNews back in the day. A lot of people don't
So
remember
that proves that she really must have been crazy.
Say she was great here. I mean, no complaints at all. But
she was working with you.
She was great, though. I mean, she's a marketing genius, obviously. I mean, we're seeing that on the national phase. But we've been very critical of her in recent months. We were the first to report on that airport incident that really caused her some turbulence. We were also the first to request the files related to that. I think our campaign was not too pleased about that, but I got to give credit where it's due on this. I mean, Epstein is an issue that you're either on the right side of history or the wrong side of history. And those pushing for the full release of this information and accountability for those implicated, they're on the right side of history, and she's on the right side of history. I got to give her credit for
And
this.
I would say she's like one of 4 people on the right side of history because, of course, all the Democrats voted against it because it was politically inopportune for Trump. But where the hell were they when Joe Biden was president?
Yeah.
You look at these 4 Republicans, they were the people who swam upstream of their own party.
Absolutely.
They were, this is an indictment as much of the Republican Party as it is of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party had 4 years under AG Merrick Garland, under Joe Biden, that they could have released this information. The Republicans had to have it dragged out of them. I think if they have any desire for the truth, they'll then send a letter to the CIA and say that the CIA has to disclose the information related to Epstein being an intelligence asset.
Yeah, bring it out. All of it needs to be out there. We don't.
And
need
by
to
the
know-
way, we now have enough. I mean, we have seen enough to secure indictments on several high-profile people. It's time that these people are indicted and brought to justice for this.
Damn right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, what else we got this week, Dylan? A crazy week in South Carolina politics. What else you want to hit?
So, AG Alan Wilson was taking some heat this week. And honestly, he was catching strays. I mean, we've called plenty of times. We've called for accountability for that office. But this week, there was just some false accountability raining down on his head.
That is true. I mean, we've been kicking him in the nuts a bit for some things that they deserved some criticism. But in one case, he was accused by a blogger here in South Carolina of having a criminal record in North Carolina. Or let's be clear, she didn't technically accuse him, but she pointed out here's an individual with the same name, the same birthday, getting arrested in North Carolina, and then proceeded to say maybe this is why he's so soft on crime, because he's got this.
And it was a
record.
1992 like misdemeanor theft of property or destruction of property
yeah.
charge. Like, it was already a logical stretch.
Right.
But I would say, what did it take Jennifer Wood? Maybe
30
5
seconds.
minutes to
No,
find,
30
not even
seconds.
5 minutes to find
Not even
the
a minute.
actual person who was arrested in North Carolina in this case. It just was plain
Yeah.
false.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because, you look at people like Lee Grenade, who's the blogger who posted this. We need those voices. We need people holding folks like Alan Wilson, Nancy Mace, all these elected officials. We need people holding them accountable. But when they blow their credibility like that, it just, and this is, the sad thing is it's not the first time. She came after him a few years back, claiming that he spent victim rights money to go watch Trump's trial up in New York. And the receipts did not back that claim up either. So I think she's got some kind of vendetta against the guy, I guess.
We were just talking about how the mainstream media is blowing its credibility. So that's why it's really disappointing to me when people who could be credible, independent voices just do things that are completely false, verifiably false, and that they could have known. It's not like this was a mistake that I can say, look, I would have made that mistake too.
Right.
I look at that and just go, that is wanton disregard of reality.
Yeah. Well, and it wasn't the only hit. He was punched by the Lieutenant Governor, Pamela Evett. Directly, she came at Alan Wilson's campaign this week, accusing him of I guess, complicity in a triple suspect incident that led to a woman being shot and burned to death in the PD region of South
Horrific
Carolina.
case.
Yeah, it was a horrible case. This woman went with another woman who was supposed to be her friend to pick up a puppy, to purchase a puppy. And instead, when she got there, these three individuals allegedly shot her in the car, set the car on fire. Just a horrific story. But Pam Yvette came out and said, basically, this is what happens when you have an attorney general that's more focused on climbing the ladder, as you said, than doing his job. And that'd be great.
But Wilson prosecuted the case, right?
And that would be the thing. If there were a connection between the attorney general and any of these suspects, that would be a valid criticism, maybe. But there is no connection. All these are cases that were tried by a completely different prosecutor, no referrals. So I don't understand it.
Now, maybe the argument is like Wilson could have taken the case and prosecuted, but just realistically looking at the way that the state of South Carolina's criminal justice system happens, the AG's office is not just taking random cases from solicitors.
Yeah.
That's just, they will take a case if there's a reason, if there's a conflict and they need to move it to another solicitor. But they're not just over here grabbing random cases.
No.
And this is just another completely baseless hit.
Yeah.
And it's like Allen's office, as he often reminds us when we, ask him and press him about accountability on various things, handles hundreds of cases at a time.
Yeah.
Surely they could have found one that is actually like a valid hit that he actually had his fingerprints on that did not have a disposition that would be amenable to the public. And yet they decided to hit him on this completely random case. And, you could say, oh, well, maybe the Wilson camp could turn it around and hit her on her record, except for she has none. She's been standing there with the pulse behind Henry McMaster at press conferences.
Yeah.
What record do they have to hit her on, except for maybe her husband's very credible fraud allegations that have been leveled against him that I reported on?
That's right. You did. And obviously the DEI stuff that you reported on as well, or that we reported on, is really hurting her too. We're hearing on the campaign trail. If that really struggling in the polls, we saw the Policy Council poll you mentioned earlier, Dylan, that had her struggling, but there was another poll that came out this week. The results have not been made public yet, but 8%, Dylan, 8%. This is somebody who spent $2 million trying to get her name out there to the people of South Carolina. That is a terrible, terrible number.
Well, and I spoke with somebody who's involved in South Carolina politics this week who, under the condition of anonymity, and they made a good point, which is that if your pitch is, did you like the last 10 years? Do you want more of that? That's kind of a tough sell.
Yeah. But here's the crazy thing. If you look at this race where we are now, and this is why it's going to be so much fun to cover it over the next 4 months, each one of these top four candidates has a path. Pamela Yvette, if she catches a wave, catches Donald Trump's endorsement. Nancy Mace, as we mentioned a moment ago, she stays disciplined and is able to hammer on this populist thing she's got going. Ralph Norman finally starts spending his money, stressing that fiscal conservative message. And obviously the AG in the front runner seat in most polls. All four of them have a path to get this nomination.
You know what? I really think that this Epstein thing could open a path for Nancy Mace, should she have the courage to take it. Because you listen, it has been radio silence from everybody in the state of South Carolina, elected officials, candidates. Nobody wants to talk about that. That is a live wire issue with the political
They
donor
don't want
class.
to cross Donald Trump. They're
But
afraid.
okay, if she starts going on the stage and saying, I'm the only one who has the stones to call for accountability for this, this is somewhere where the Trump base really wants accountability for Epstein. The Trump government not providing it.
Right.
And so maybe she could come and say, look, I'm willing to break with the big man at the top to provide you guys with what you want. I'm the only one who's taken a vote to demand accountability on this.
And don't forget the wild card, Rom Reddy. Still waiting to find out, does he jump into this race? This is a guy who just this last week, the judicial reform bill that his group has led the fight on, DOJ-C, that bill clearing a critical threshold in the House of Representatives. It's headed to the floor of the House for a debate. They could get this bill passed and pull off the most substantive reform of our broken judicial system in decades. And this guy's he's not even a candidate yet, and he's out there making this kind of an impact.
Yeah, we got an email this week, and I've seen similar sentiments posted online in multiple places, which is basically, who the heck is this guy? And I think we are one of the only outlets that can provide a decent explanation of that. In his own words, he sat down with us a couple months ago in Myrtle Beach before one of his events. It was a fascinating conversation. I would direct people to that interview if they want to learn a little bit more about who Rom is. And we hope to have him back in these studios again, perhaps on FITSPolitic Live Wednesday nights, 7 p.m. Get
What a
him
great
booked in
plug.
here to
By the
come
way,
and explain further.
we had a wonderful guest on FITSPolitic this past week, Spencer Wetmore, outgoing Democrat representative from the South Carolina Low Country, hails from Folly Beach, South Carolina. Just a brilliant woman. If Democrats could just put her in one of those 3D printers and sure, I mean, they'd be in a much better position. I mean, I was blown away by how
It was a great conversation. And what I really enjoyed about it is, we don't agree on everything or nearly everything policy wise, but it was a respectful conversation. It was an insightful conversation. And we really got to the heart of the matter of a number of issues that we talk about week in and week out that kind of drive South Carolina to be the way that it is, and the things that we need to change that we constantly talk about. To hear about it from her perspective as somebody who's in the General Assembly, as somebody who's in the minority party, it was fascinating.
Yeah, no doubt. And continuing that string of excellent guests on the show, obviously started with the Attorney General. Then we had Wes Donahue, one of the best strategists in the country, the heart and soul of the Freedom Caucus, Joe White, and then Spencer Wetmore last week. We've got some great guests coming up in the next few weeks. We're going to have Justin Bamberg, the People's Rep, one of the up-and-coming attorneys in South Carolina, lawyer, legislator, but one of the good ones, I think, in my book. This is a guy, every time I see him, he's on the side of right, Dylan. But after him, we're going to have Paul Dans and his wife, Mary Helen Bowers, on the show, too. Really excited about sitting down with Paul to see where his campaign's going. It's a great format, as Dylan said, every Wednesday night, live at 7 p.m., bringing the best political voices on the biggest political issues to you. All right, everybody, that is a wrap for this week's edition of the Week in Review. I want to thank everybody for tuning in once again. By the way, if you are not already a subscriber of FITSNews.com, please consider doing that today. Or if you are, try and gift one to a friend, because that is what empowers everything that we do here. All the reporting, the investigations, the analysis that you've been following, all of that is thanks to your subscription. So please, if you haven't already, subscribe or gift one to a friend. And we've got some sick merch in the merch store, people. I'm not rocking one of the sweatshirts today, but we've got a ton of killer sweatshirts, coffee mugs, all sorts of other good stuff in the FITSNews merch store. So if you want to support us that way, head over to the merch section of our website, buy something there to support our efforts. I'll catch you next time on the Week in Review.